Excellent. All clear so far. Fantastic. Well, like I say, we're here with Robin Horsfall. A little bit of an intro about Robin. Many of you will know him. People in our movement will know him from the Day of Freedom in, not the Day of Freedom, the UK Freedom March in, I think it was June or July 2018. And Robin took to the platform and literally blew everybody away. I mean, I'm loud when I speak, but Robin turned the volume up somewhat and gave an absolutely barnstorming speech, telling everybody that we need to get to the polling booths and we need to start voting. But of course, there's a lot more to Robin Horsfall than what you saw on the platform. Robin is really, I suppose, you could describe him as a legend within the military. He's a tireless campaigner for veterans issues, particularly veterans that have served in Northern Ireland. He's an ex-member of the Parachute Regiment. Were you 2 and 3 Para? Or was it
two Para?
Two Para. Ex-member of 2 Para, and of course, famously, he was a member of 22 SAS and was involved in the Iranian embassy siege, deployments to Northern Ireland, and was involved in I think, jumping out of the back of a Hercules over the South Atlantic at some point in 1982. Am I right, Robin?
Yeah.
Just as the white flags were fluttering over Port Stanley, Robin was diving into the South Atlantic and getting hauled out of the South Atlantic and onto a warship. So there's a lot going on, and I think it's safe to say that, Robin, you've lived an extremely full life. Would that be a fair description?
Yeah, I don't think I've wasted a lot of it.
Not for. I mean, I read his book today. I bought the book yesterday because I've known Robin for 2 or 3 years now, probably going on 4 years, just through different campaigns that we've all been involved in. But I knew bits about you, Robin, but I didn't know the full story. And the book again, if you've got a copy of that book there, Robin, we can get that up on the screen.
The Fighting Scared one, yeah.
Yeah, Fighting Scared. I got it on Kindle last night. I basically read it between yesterday and today, and it takes a lot for a book to get my attention to the extent that I sit down and read the whole thing. So what I want to do tonight, Robin, if it's okay with you, obviously we want to talk about the Northern Ireland vets issue because that's very important. But I want to talk about your life and how you got from basically where you were as a young child, and I think it's fair to say you were a very thoughtful, and I don't want to sound wimpish when I say this, but a very thoughtful, sensitive young child that went into the military, and your sort of teenage years and your formative years in the military really changed the course of your life and changed the sort of person you were. Do you want to talk a bit about that, about your background and how you got from there to here?
I think when I was born, my name wasn't Horsfall. My name was Thane. Excuse me, I've got a sweet in my mouth. I had a bit of a sticky throat. But my father was a thief. So my first 7 years of life, I never had a father. I lived with my mum and my grandmother and my grandfather. And I had other brothers and sisters after me as well. But we never knew our father because not only was he a thief, but he was a bad thief and he kept getting caught. So he spent all my childhood in prison. And my mother and he got divorced when I was 7 years old. And she married Geoffrey Horsfall, who gave me his name and adopted me. But I hadn't had a father for 7 years and he'd never had kids. And the two of us clashed, and his way of dealing with me was not to smack me, it was to batter me. And so I lived in abject fear of him. And as he was the only male role model that I had in my life, that gave me a real problem with authority figures. So when you beat submission into somebody, you take away their ability to negotiate. So when a kid who's brought in front of an authority like a headmaster or a police officer or something like that shrugs his shoulders and sticks his bottom lip out, it's not because he's being sullen. It's because he doesn't believe that anybody's going to want to know what he's actually thinking and why he did something. And I think by the time I got to sort of 12, that was me. But I got into grammar school and I was an army brat, suddenly thrust into a middle-class Surrey grammar school, and I didn't fit there either. So I was very isolated. So I started playing truant, and at the age of 14, I decided that my life was going nowhere, even at that age. And I walked into the Army Careers Office on Hospital Hill in Aldershot. Walked in at the age of 14 and said, I want to join the army. And they said, how old are you? And I said, I'm 14. They said, well, you're too young, but next year you'll be able to leave school, because school leaving age was 15 in 1972. And so I went off I'd filled in some forms. I think my mother was very relieved. And I went off to Sutton Coldfield to do the tests to get in. Now, I'd been a St. John's ambulance boy, which got me into football for free and the go-kart racing and stuff like that. So I tried to join the Royal Army Medical Corps, and as a technician, which I think I would have been very good at, actually. But I ended up, after the weekend, being offered the parachute regiment, Infantry Junior Leaders Parachute Regiment. And I was going to take whatever I was offered, and that was what I was offered. So I took it. And on September the 12th, 1972, I turned up at the Infantry Junior Leaders Battalion at Park Hall Camp, Oswestry, for a 2.25 year stint there as a boy soldier, full time, and then went on to join my battalion before I was 18. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the things when you were talking about so obviously you'd had this terrible experience of really not getting on with your father, and your father being violent towards you, and then when you went into the military, and I think it should be said as well that you got into grammar school by passing the 11 plus. It wasn't like you just sort of waltzed in there. You had to pass the examination. So obviously there's a very active brain, because I think a lot of people have this idea of infantry soldiers and paras, and obviously I was in the infantry as well, that we're sort of brainless, knuckle dragging numbskulls, and I think some of the most intelligent and thoughtful people I met were in the army, and some of the most stupid and horrible people I met were in the army as well. So there's always a mix there. But from then on, while you were in basic training, there was almost like a campaign of attack against you for some reason. Just if you just unpack that a little bit, and what happened, and how you coped with it, because to me in the book you actually cope with it fantastically well, because I think many people would have actually cracked under the strain of that and just gone, I'm out of here. But what drove you to?
Yeah, it became obvious that there was a peak when you have problems at school or problems with your peers. You can always go home to a safe place. When I went home to my stepfather, and so there wasn't really a safe place for me. So the army was going to be my escape from that. But there was a very important piece missing in my upbringing, and that was having a man who taught you how to be a man, how to take the mickey out of yourself, how to josh, how to be physically confident, how to stand up for yourself, and how not to be too sensitive, how to laugh at an insult. And I wasn't that, because my upbringing had been predominantly female. And so when people tested me, as young men do, and older men, I would snap. I would rise to the bait, and that made me vulnerable. And then when I actually got punched by somebody the first time, which was a big lad, I didn't fight back, because I didn't realize that I was mouthing off too much, and what I was doing was fighting to it. And so I got dropped, and it was a shock, and I didn't fight back. And of course, then by not fighting back, it made me a target for everybody else. Some people have asked me in the past, there was one thing you could change from your whole life. It would have been that moment. I should have got up and got a damn good hiding off him and really got stuck in. Yeah. Because it would have made me comfortable amongst the rest of my peers as somebody who would fight. But I let it drag out for about 6 weeks, and it got worse and worse and worse until I tried sort of hiding. I tried going to bed early. I tried all sorts, but there was no hiding place, because you were in 14-man rooms. And one day I was close to thinking about calling it a day. The problem with calling it a day was that I had nowhere better to go to. So in spite of the fact that I was very miserable and unhappy, I wasn't that much better off at home. And a lot of people at home had said, you won't last. So that was a bit of a driving force too. I went and sat on the bed with a lad called Pete Sadler, who's still a friend of mine now, 45 years later. Yeah, it's that long. And it's more than that. It's 49 years later. Wow. And we're still friends. And I sat on his bed and we were bullying our boots. And he just sort of quietly said, don't worry, Rob, you're not as bad as they say you are. And it was just enough to keep me going. And I gradually found my confidence in performing my duties and tasks in the top 10%. So I got my self-esteem, even though they didn't like me, I got my self-esteem from performing well. The problem with having been at the bottom of the pile is you've got to fight your way all the way back to the top, and that makes you over-aggressive. And then, so you don't make any friends. It just stops them physically bullying you. Yeah,
I think that's a very shared experience by a lot of men that joined the army in the 70s. It was no different when I joined in the 80s. I mean, the first day I got to battalion, the local battalion thug just literally beat the shit out of me, and I could have fought back, but I was new to battalion, and I could have taken him, but I just took it. And again, it was a similar sort of thing that went on for about 6 weeks in battalion, and then one Christmas do, I was in the toilets, just having a slash, at a smoker, and a different guy came in and thought he'd try it on, so I just literally splattered his blood all over the toilets, and that was it. The bullying finished. Surprise, surprise, and that's it's kind of. It's a law of the jungle, but it's the way it is, and I don't know if it's still like that now. It probably isn't. It's probably gone the other way a bit now.
We're all just chimpanzees with technology, really,
and big brains. Well, not so big brains.
Yeah, we have pecking orders. We have status. When we're young, we're trying to establish ourselves as dominant in our group. It's very natural, and being civilized is actually trying to control that.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that impressed me, Robin, again in the book was, and again, it's almost like you were on a path, and the path was only going to lead to one place eventually, because obviously you joined the Paras. The Paras is kind of, I suppose, I'm going to get into trouble for saying this, but like a gateway drug for the SAS almost, isn't it? A lot of Paras end up in the SAS, and one of the things that impressed me was when you were a junior leader, you were running around I think it was Snowdonia, map reading at the weekends. Am I right? Was it the weekends you were doing that? Or was So you were going from Oswestry up into the Welsh mountains, and so we'll cover that later on. But when you actually finally did selection, you had a lot of grounding in your legs going up, very, very steep hills with weight on, but you'd also got the map reading side of things. And obviously, again, I've never done selection, I never had the bottle to do anything like that. But the reality is, from what I can gather, a lot of it is about map reading, time over distance. It's not really necessarily running very fast. It's been able to tab really hard and get from A to B without making too many navigational mistakes. And it was almost like you doing that in the junior leaders was almost preparing you for what you would end up doing, a few years later when you actually.
I always loved physical activities and races, and I love the mountains. I've always loved the mountains. And so the infantry junior leaders would always compete in a race called the Welsh 3000s. And so there you are. I did the first one when I was 16, the second one when I was 17. And we spent all our weekends up in the mountains, practicing the routes, running as a 4-man group. And you climb or descend on the junior route. You climb or descend a total of 12,000 feet over 15 miles. And we were completing that course in about 3 hours 40, 3 hours 50. Yeah, and so tremendously aerobically fit for those kind of things. But it was a first stepping stone, and then of course you go to Paradepot, where they virtually try to rebuild you into an aggressive stormtrooper. I mean, that's the purpose of paratroopers are essentially the most aggressive form of light infantry. They're designed to be dropped behind enemy lines and to fight to the death until somebody breaks through and catches up with them. And they make you very mean and nasty for a purpose. So you're corralled in a garrison town called Aldershot, and you function there, and you don't realize until you leave it what a violent and aggressive society you live in. But there's a great integrity to that, in the sense that you're only there because you can fight. If you can't fight, you shouldn't be there. If you want to whine about something, then you shouldn't be there, because your whole raison d'etre is to be a fighter. But you had geniuses there, and you had the brain dead morons as well. They're all part of the same battalion.
Yep.
But their one common bond was that they would all fight. So that was stage 2 that prepared me for going to do SAS selection when I was 21. Yeah.
Can we take a bit of a detour, Robin? And if we really, I suppose, get into Northern Ireland, because again, I mean, you know, I think most soldiers in the 70s and 80s, Northern Ireland was our battlefield, and you know, unless you know, people were involved in the Falklands, but Northern Ireland was where we were going to see real active duty with really nasty stuff going on. And I suppose it was a massive training ground for the British Army, really, for 30 years. Just tell us about your experiences in Belfast. I mean, there's a couple of incidents stood out. Obviously, the one in Ballymurphy, which I want you to maybe talk about, where you were coming in off patrol into the base at Moyard, which I'm guessing is what we knew as New Barnsley Police Station. And there was also, I know you can't talk about it in specific details, but the contact that you talk about at the very beginning of the book, just if you could chat a little bit about those without saying anything that's going to be challenging.
Ballymurphy is a very tiny enclave in West Belfast, and in 1971 there was a 3-day firefight between the IRA and the Parachute Regiment and the Queen's Regiment, and 8 people got killed, and you know, it was a provisional IRA stronghold and an extremely dangerous place. And I did my tour there, which was my second tour in Northern Ireland, at the end of 1975 going into 76. No, 76 going into 77. And during that tour, I got shot at 3 times. I got hit in the leg once, and I laid on a bomb. You know, and that's in.
Yeah, tell that story about lying on the bomb, because that's an interesting. Yeah. That's a very interesting story.
So we were. There was a junction between the Crumlin Road and White Rock Road, just up from Moyard, and on the corner there was a bar called Kelly's Bar, and the opposite side of the road there was a post office. And so my patrol, led by my patrol commander Pete Light, we went round the back of the post office, and in the dark, and laid in the open ground beside the post office to cover the patrol that was going into Kelly's Bar to do some questioning. And as I laid on the ground, the magazine of my rifle rested on what should have been grass and scraped on something metallic. So I pulled away some of the grass and realized very, very quickly that it was a galvanized bucket with a taped on lid facing the post office wall. And it was buried half in the ground, almost completely in the ground. So I immediately jumped up, ran around the corner and said to Pete, "There's a Claymore mine, there's a bomb there." He said, "You sure?" I said, "I'm absolutely 100% sure." And so he called the report in, and there was a captain leading the patrol in Kelly's Bar, and they came across, and the captain took over the situation. Of course, we'd moved back and created a sort of small cordon around the area to keep out of the blast zone. And the captain said to me, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yes, I'm sure." And he said, "Well, take me to it." I said, "You must be joking." He said, "You know, we've had all this training at Ballykinler and Northern Ireland training and everything about bombs and the consequences of messing around with improvised explosive devices and so on, and the damage they do and the casualties they cause. And now you want me to crawl back across the ground so you can look at." And he did. He made me. He ordered me. So off we go. And he ties a piece of string to the bomb. and he starts to pull it with this piece of string, and I'm laying behind his boots with my fingers in my ears, thinking the strange things about him. And of course, he can't pull it out of the soil. So he then comes back and says, "Yeah, I think it's a bomb too." And they call in the ammunition technical officer, Ato, whose code name was Felix, and he comes in, and the whole standby platoon gets called out for the night to cordon off the whole area. And when it's dismantled, they find there's about 10 pounds of co-op explosives, homemade explosives, 2 ounces of Frangex high explosives, an electric detonator, and all these big chunks of iron castings from a car packed in with tinfoil wadding it in, and a taped on cardboard lid. And the wires went 200 meters up into the turf lodge. And there was a battery that, well, you know, people who remember back to the 70s remember these huge big batteries like bricks that went into your bicycle lamps. And somebody had actually tried to initiate it, but it was cold, it was wet, it was January, and it hadn't had enough power to initiate the device. So that was a lucky escape. Yeah,
yeah, totally. And I mean,
well, I mean, light duties.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. You're on light duties, weren't you? Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing is, I mean, that that was 1975. Was it 75?
End of 76.
76.
It actually was January 77. Yeah.
And you fast forward 12 years later, and I'm in New Barnsley, Ballymurphy. We're just on the opposite side of Kelly's Corner to where you were hit. And one of my mates goes firm. We're up in New Barnsley on patrol. And exactly the same thing, command wire ID, he was down in a fire position. We all had berries on then, you know, it was the kind of chop between berries and helmets all the way through the trouble, isn't it? We had berries on. Someone hits the switch on the command wire, and it goes off and basically blows the guy's berry off his head. And that was all the damage it did to him. Again, it was just it didn't work. It didn't activate properly. So, you know, and I think for the listeners, when people hear about the Ballymurphy massacre, and I'm not laughing about the Ballymurphy massacre, I'm laughing about this idea that there was never anything going on in Ballymurphy. It was, you know, it was a lovely, peaceful place where the locals threw rose petals on the ground as soldiers walked past. Ballymurphy was an extremely violent, sinister, and dangerous place for British soldiers to be. From the early 1970s right the way through until certainly I finished my deployment in 1989, it was when you were in Ballymurphy, you were switched on, and where you were actually shot, there was I think he was Anglian or Queen's Regiment soldier called Corporal Bannister, was literally running back into that what then became New Barnsley police station, and he was shot dead covering his troops going back into the base while we were there. And we saw gunmen moving about, and you couldn't engage them because it was too much of a fleeting glance and so on and so forth. So again, for the listeners in England who've been hearing all this absolute nonsense about what happens in Northern Ireland, the British Army weren't victims in Northern Ireland, but the British Army were the people that were there to keep the peace and hold the line. And this rewriting of history, I find absolutely appalling. And I think doing these sort of shows, Robin, is a way that we can say, well, look, here's two soldiers 12 years apart in the same place, exactly the same things happening. Is there a pattern here? Is there something going on in Ballymurphy that we should be telling people? And I think, you know, we've got to kind of get that message across.
Yeah, Ballymurphy is a microcosm of the issues that caused the Troubles to begin. And the Troubles began in Northern Ireland because of the fact that the majority of the Catholic population in Northern Ireland were being deprived their civil rights. They were an underclass, and they were marching for civil rights, supported by a large number of Protestants as well. But extremists on both sides turned them into battles, Catholic Protestant battles, and bad politics made a bad situation worse. The deals that Edward Heath made with the Unionists in the early years, bringing in internment, just fed the problem, because the Provisional IRA was a very small-time bunch of gangsters until internment, and then resentful young men who lived in deprived circumstances were encouraged or felt compelled to join the IRA. So there's, it's not a simple case of one side bad, one side good. But the mission of the British Army was to stand between the two factions and prevent a civil war, which we did. We stopped a civil war. We saved hundreds of thousands of lives by
I mean,
putting ourselves there.
I totally agree. And one of the things, Robin, a lot of the commentators in the media now, in the BBC and ITV, are people who benefited from that. I mean, I've got friends on both sides of the community. I've got friends that are loyalists. I've got friends that were at one time, Republicans and were involved in the IRA and were involved in Sinn Féin. And in fact, interestingly, many of those people that were involved in the IRA and Sinn Féin have totally come away from them and disavowed them because they basically compromised with their dealings with the European Union and so on and so forth. And that if they're genuine Irish patriots and they hate the fact that the provisional IRA is quite happy to sign up to everything that the European Union wants them to do and become a fully sort of progressive communist globalist entity, and many of the Irish patriots are annoyed about that. And of course, on the loyalist side, the loyalists feel totally betrayed by the British government. And I think there's a very great danger that we can kind of oversimplify things and like you say, it's probably a more complex situation now than it even was in the 60s and 70s, because there's so many more, there's a lot more dynamics in there. And it's it's still a very risky thing to try and work out exactly what the troubles in Northern Ireland were about. It was bad then. I think it's even worse now as time goes on.
I don't try to claim any knowledge about Northern Irish politics. It's complicated. It's historical. It's a quagmire. And it belongs to the province. It belongs to the people over there. My only involvement with Northern Ireland today is to stop the repeated prosecution and persecution of the soldiers who were previously investigated and exonerated of any wrongdoing by the legal authorities up to 50 years ago, because they're being used as political pawns or political prisoners. We don't believe that there's any chance of any of them actually being convicted, but they're being used as part of a political propaganda campaign to discredit the British government in the past. And so you've got men in the 70s and 80s who have done nothing wrong, who are being dragged continuously for the last years of their life backwards and forwards to Ireland, and being denied their legal rights, as a recent case with Soldiers A and C proves. Justice O'Hare said that that they had been denied their legal rights, and some Sinn Féin people have said they're often a technicality. They weren't. They were found not guilty. And that's that kind of nonsense, that personal effect. And people have claimed that soldiers want to be above the law. No, they don't. But there's no new and compelling evidence that would get through the mainland's Department of Public Prosecution. So we're making a complaint at the moment against the Attorney General and the Public Prosecution Service, because we're claiming that they should have known that they couldn't win that case and it should never have come to court, and the ones they've got lined up will be the same. It's an ongoing process. We're encouraged. We've had an awful lot of success. We've got huge numbers of people following us now. But it's a long battle by veteran volunteers, and we're working hard at it.
Exactly, and I think the difference is between you and the people who are trying to demonize the British Army and drag soldiers to Northern Ireland to drag them through the courts. And like you say, even if these men aren't convicted, the stress that it's putting them and their families under, and the question mark it's putting over the individuals who have been dragged back to Northern Ireland, but not just those men. One of the very sinister things about this, what this does, Robin, it actually legitimizes targeting, if the Troubles ever came back, it would legitimize targeting British Army veterans by the Republican movement, by the IRA. And that's one of the very, very sinister things that people aren't even picking up on. I mean, I've lived here for 30 years. I still check under my vehicle every day. I've got security at the house. I've got cameras everywhere and all sorts of other measures in case anybody, comes and tries to have a pop. And is that a normal society where you're living in a society where people who, when you served here and when I served here, now actually hold high office in government? The finance minister, Conor Murphy, is the finance minister. Now,
Northern Ireland has got convicted bombers serving on the Legislative Assembly.
Exactly.
Now, and then they are putting pressure on the judiciary for political reasons, and that pressure is working. The Ballymurphy inquest was slanted because the evidence was one-sided. The coroner stated that she believed that the people involved who were shot by British soldiers because 7.62 ammunition had been used. But we have lots of evidence, some of it directly from the mouths of the IRA, saying that they had stolen British Army rifles and they had 7.62 ammunition and they were using them in the Ballymurphy on that weekend, that battle. So it's not fair, and we're asking for an independent group of retired judges who have no history with Northern Ireland to decide what is new and compelling evidence to stop people being abused for political purposes.
Yeah, and I think the fact that these are malicious prosecutions, and the context, and that's one of the reasons why it's so important us talking tonight, because the context is, in my 2-year tour, I did a 2-year tour of Northern Ireland where we were deployed more or less all the time between South Armagh and Belfast, and my experience of that was that we didn't engage when we could have engaged because we knew that if we did engage and kill somebody, even if they had a weapon, and it didn't just happen once, it happened on several occasions, even just with me, one man, where I could have engaged a man with a weapon and I didn't, because I knew that by the time we got there, the weapon would have gone, the mask would have gone, and that you would have shot an innocent civilian. And, we were savvy enough in the 80s to realize that. But obviously in 1971, there was a lot more going on than there was in 1980, 86, 87 to 89. It was far more active. And obviously, again, when you were there, it would have been far more active as well. So, this is what people need to be told by people that were there on the ground, not by slick journalists who are so left leaning that they could support Mao Zedong and Joseph Stalin. This is, they need to listen to real people who were there and actually experience this thing at first hand.
We're up against a sophisticated and extremely well-funded opposition that are trying to create a dystopian history, of freedom fighters who are defending themselves against a military occupation, which is not the truth at all. And Irish history is full of Robin Hood style heroes who fought against authority. If any nation has a reputation for fighting against authority, it would be the Irish, and sometimes with good reason and sometimes with bad, depending on your point of view. But no, it's a real struggle. We had to fight for years just to get these soldiers adequately funded so they could have a decent legal defense, where Sinn Féin IRA's people were claiming legal aid and getting it granted in the millions. Gerry Adams himself was granted legal aid. How do you work that one out? The guy's a millionaire. It's weird. It's weird and corrupt. You mentioned civilians. Well, let's just remember that every single member of the IRA was a civilian. They're all civilians, and the UDA, they're all civilians. So there's no visible difference between any of them. There's those with guns and there's those without guns. And the only time we get to choose who's a terrorist is when somebody actually gets the first shot at us, or sets off a bomb. And what people don't recall as well is this didn't remain in Northern Ireland.
Exactly.
They followed us home. They followed us to the UK. They followed us to our homes. They murdered our wives and our children. They put bombs under buses with our families in them. They blew up bandsmen playing music in Hyde Park. They blew up the banking system. They blew up the government in Brighton. They blew up and murdered a member of the royal family, Lord Mountbatten, in the Republic of Ireland. These are thoroughly evil people, and they did terrible, terrible things. And they ran a campaign, and they trained other people. They took money from, not just from raising it from people who believed they were Irish in the USA, but they took money from the Soviet Union. They took money from Muammar Gaddafi, and they went and trained the PLO. I mean, this is the type of people, that you talk that are now in the MLA in Northern Ireland. And in fact, you can't think that the government are behaving in an impartial and objective way. It's wrong.
It's crazy. I mean, that the government really, and they're setting a very bad precedent, because obviously there's lots of threats. There's lots of terrorist threats around the globe, and I mean, what happened in Northern, and I don't want to get into the politics. I want to talk about your story, but what really happened in Northern Ireland, in my opinion, was we won the war, and Tony Blair snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. I think it's as simple as that. The IRA, I've got a lot of friends that were in all sorts of units in the police, E4 and HMSU, and again, guys that were doing undercover work in Northern Ireland, and also from just reading the history of the thing and living through it and serving there. The IRA were literally on the run. They were pulling off spectaculars from time to time. They had a few units that maybe weren't as penetrated as the other, but again, if you read the book that we talked about in the last podcast with Aaron Edwards, Agents of Influence, which I think is absolutely fantastic, he goes into huge detail about how compromised the Republican movement was. And so the British government has a huge responsibility in what it's done and in how it's actually betrayed not just the soldiers, because I believe successive British governments and interestingly enough, successive Tory governments have betrayed the veterans, but they've also betrayed the good people of Northern Ireland, because what's happened is that the body politics has been handed over to extremists. It's as simple as that. So you've got extremists that were at one time murderous, I'm just going to say it, scumbags, now putting on Armani suits and swanning round after they've had their NLP training and their elocution lessons and sounding very, very plausible and talking a good fight instead of putting bombs under people's cars. So, yeah, let's draw a line under Northern Ireland there, I think, Robin, because it just gets me depressed when I talk about it. But I think, sorry, go on.
Just one thing I did mention, I want to mention it because, we've got an audience. And it was that, I mentioned that we are, our only funding comes from our GoFundMe account, and you put the link on the page for it.
Actually, I need the link for GoFundMe. I've got every other link apart from that one, so thanks for reminding me of that one. We'll get that link in after the.
We've got a GoFundMe account. Just Robin Horsfall GoFundMe, it'll come up. But and it's all we have to actually fund. Everything we do is being done by volunteers who have given the last 5 or 6 years to this campaign. And so I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, I'm just going to find that now, and I'm going to put that in at the end of the broadcast. So just give me 2 ticks. I'll just get that, because I don't want to miss that, because that's really important. Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of shysters out there asking for money for all sorts of things, but this is a really worthy cause. And I'll be posting this GoFundMe and on any of the social media accounts I've got, because we've got to win this battle, not just for the soldiers, and there's not that many soldiers. Well, there's enough, but there's not that many soldiers been prosecuted. But this is for the honor of the British Army, but also for the integrity of the British Army. Because if soldiers cannot go to war knowing that the government has their back, even if something goes wrong, if you make a split-second decision and you shoot a civilian, that's not murder. That's a split-second decision that's gone wrong. It's completely different to somebody going out premeditatively to murder innocent people, and that happens in war. That's happened in every war, time immemorial. And again, people have got to realize that. So I'm going to put the GoFundMe at the end of the broadcast. So we've had the tour, we've had Ballymurphy, we've had you. Thinking you'd twisted your ankle when really you'd been shot through. Was it through the foot or through the ankle?
No, just the back of my just the back of my right leg, my left leg. Yeah, I'm looking for the hole. Yeah, my left leg. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So
It was a small bullet, 2-2.
2-2. Yeah.
We were getting shot at, but we were going towards the gate of the camp, and it was dark and it was raining, and I got knocked over, and the guys grabbed me by the lift webs and dragged me through the gate, and I was laying on my back, and the rain was falling on my face, and somebody took my rifle and unloaded it. And one of the guys said, "Where have you been hit?" And I said, "I've twisted my effing ankle." And they went, and they looked really disappointed, and they got up and walked away and just left me there. And the medic came, and in a Saracen ambulance, and they put me in the back. And when he switched the lights on in the back, and they were driving off to Musgrave Park Hospital.
Yeah.
Musgrave Park.
Yeah.
He sort of started to look at my ankles, got my boot off, and then said, he said, "You've been shot." And it was a 2-2 bullet, so it just penetrated the boot and went through my putty and then into the skin. So it was a fairly small wound. It hadn't got as far as the bone, but it knocked me off. And all the pain I was in, because I'd seriously twisted my ankle. And so they, went off to Musgrave Park in the hospital. And then I got sent home for Christmas leave, because it was just before Christmas. And then I came back, and I was supposed to be on light duties when I went out and laid on that bomb.
Found the bomb, yeah. So after Northern Ireland, how did you make the decision to go and do SAS selection? And again, I want to dig into what happened when you're on selection, because again, it's quite yours is quite an unusual story. Well, maybe it's not unusual. Maybe that sort of thing happens all the time. But you tell the story, because you tell it a lot better than I do. But just tell us your story about what happened on selection and how you got there.
I went to. When I was 1977, my mother died, which she'd divorced Geoffrey Horsfall some years before that. So essentially, I was the lad who stayed in camp at Christmas, and the army was my life. It was everything. That was where I lived. That was where that was my home. When she died, just before she died, I was transferred to an independent platoon called Vigilant Platoon, because 2 Para was going to Berlin, and I didn't want to be away, when she was so ill. And she died just after I joined Vigilant Platoon. And then I was so happy with the Vig, because they were the wild boys of the Parachute Brigade. They had it was 2 platoons, independent budget, brigade recce when they weren't firing anti-tank missiles, and lots and lots of soldiering, very little parading and bullshit, and that was great, and I loved it. But the Milan missile came in, and it was going to go to anti-tank platoons in the battalion, so they disbanded us. And when they disbanded us, they told us that we could go wherever we wanted, and I said, "Well, I want to go back to 2 Para Mortars, which is where I'd come from." But we'd been attached to 1 Para for a tour in South Armagh, and they were short of men. So they said, well, they changed their minds. They didn't keep their promise and said, "No, you're going to a 1 Para Rifle Company." And so, just to cock a snoot at authority, I just said, "Well, I know there's something you can't stop me doing." And I went up to the battalion clerk. We're still in South Armagh, and I asked for the papers to join the SAS, and they said, "Look, you're far too young." I said, "No, the rules are you've got to have done 3 years man service," and I just about had. And so I filled in the papers, and there was a Yorkshireman at the back of the admin office, and there's always a Yorkshireman at the back of the admin office. And he went, "Hey, Horsfall, you think you're something special? You're back here with your tail between your legs, you wanker." And so again, it made me more determined. But situation was that I didn't want to do something, so I found a way of not doing it. I went and did selection in the summer of '78 and failed, but I got close to the end of test week, and so they kept me on for another 4 months to retake it in January '79. And there were 57 of us on it in January.
Can I just cut in there with you're saying you failed it. The fact that they kept you in Hereford, again, to me would suggest that it wasn't just you gave up or you binned it, there wasn't the you had really bad burns. Was that on the first selection? Yeah,
I hadn't prepared. I didn't have enough. I hadn't prepared my back or my Bergen frame adequately to take the constant pounding.
And this was just so that people understand that the Bergens then they would have, now they weren't like that when I was in, but they had a metal frame. Is that right?
Yeah.
And that would have dug into the base of your back and moved and literally ripped your back open. Yeah. So it's kind of metal on flesh, and just so that people can comprehend that, because I think that's an important point. That
I had two big ulcers. I had 2 big ulcers over my kidneys, which were open sores, and so I just with the next day would have been endurance, which was the 40-mile march with 55 pounds, and my brain sort of started to think not about the pain I was suffering today, but I would have to do 40 miles of this tomorrow. And so I turned around and went back to the previous checkpoint and called it a day. But Major Hopkins called me into his office next day, and I packed my kit to go back to Aldershot for that Yorkshireman. and he said, "Would you like to stay?" Well, I was like a drowning man clutching its right. Yeah. And they kept 4 of us on to do it again in the January, and 3 of those 4 actually passed. There was only 8 of us past the winter selection, and people think that it's something like the television. It's nothing like the television shows. If they did a television show about the actual SAS selection, it would be the most boring television show in the world, because you work alone, you go to a checkpoint, nobody encourages you, nobody beasts you, nobody trains you. You can either do it or you can't do it, and you do it on your own. So it's nothing like the nonsense that you see on TV. SAS selection is a year long. It's not just this mountain stuff. It's followed by jungle training, continuation training, combat survival training. If you're not already a parachute training, then you join your squadron. Then you have to do a troop skill and a personal skill. And then after a year, you're reassessed. And then they say, yeah, you can stay for another 2 years. And then you're reassessed again for another 3 years, and so on. So it's not getting in, it's staying in.
Yeah, I think that's again, that's something that a lot of people I don't think they fully understand. I mean, when I did Brecon, I did junior Brecon, there was an SAS guy, I'll not say his name, there was an SAS guy that was from, well, it was a non-infantry background, that's why he was doing Brecon. And he kind of stopped on one run. This was at Brecon, so he'd done selection, he was fully badged, and he stopped on one run and kind of took a bit of a breather and fell a little bit behind the squad. It was nothing in infantry terms. It would have been like, it's no big deal. That guy got RTU'd when he got back to the unit. Well, that's what I was told anyway. So that sort of stricture, I mean, people don't see that it's not just you guys getting in. It's basically, like you say, staying in once you got there, and that's what I found surprising about that incident. And obviously, reading your book as well, that there was it seemed like there was a constant assessment and. Would you say you were kind of always watching that people were looking to trip you up in the SAS? Would that be a fair thing to say, that there was something of that?
Well, I think even when I got right through my military life, I always had this piece missing about trust, confidence in my peers, getting on with other people, and I also was very young when I got in. The average age was 27, and there was me getting in at just after my 22nd birthday. And I wanted it to be better than it was. And I would mouth off about how I thought it should be better, how it could be better, how we could improve this, how we could improve that. And that didn't do me any favors. And so as time went by, after the Iranian embassy siege, things changed, because before that, people used to just return themselves to their units. They say, I've been here 3 years, I've been here 6 years, I've had enough of it, I'm going back now. I want my promotion, I want my pension, I want to move on with life and do something different. But after the Iranian embassy, Special Forces pay came in, other people started to talk about rank and mortgages, whereas before that, SAS stood for sex and soldiering. That's what it stood for. And then it became something else. So things did change midway through, Um, uh, and you either change with something or you have to move on. And eventually, I moved on. I got stitched up for something I hadn't done. I was set up, and I was very bitter about it at the time. But it turned out to be one of the better things that happened in my life because it freed me up to explore my true potential elsewhere. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what do you know of what's happening in the SAS now? I mean, is that sort of ethos still going on? Is it because obviously, I mean, I think I was talking to in fact you met the guy the guy that we met in the Union Jack Club. I'm not saying too much about him, but last time I was talking to him today, and I was telling him that we were doing this live stream tonight. I said, I think most men in their hearts want to be soldiers at some point in their lives. Every man wants to, prove that he can do whatever soldiers do and fight and so on and so forth. And I think most soldiers, if they're honest, probably have a sneaking feeling that they wanted to be in the SAS, and most of us didn't have the bottle to go do selection. I think that's the truth. So, is there is the whole ethos of basically what you're talking about there, is that still there, or do you think things have got better again and it's more of a sort of cohesive?
I think selection is. Things change, things move on, tactics and techniques and leaders and things like that move on. When I joined the SAS, there were 250 badge soldiers and about another 300 support arms in Darkest Herefordshire, unheard of, unknown about. And the main role of the unit was reconnaissance and raiding, with hostage rescue as something that, again, no one had heard about. Small, happy, poor, doing our own thing. And then it changed. It changed after the embassy. Money poured into it. Suddenly people started to use the term special forces, and people started to believe their own press. Different type of person turned up for selection. Didn't necessarily pass it, but turned up for it. And I'm sure an awful lot of changes have happened since those days. And I'm sure that the people who get in there and become badge soldiers are still exceptional in certain areas. It doesn't make them exceptional in every area. It doesn't make them good husbands or good fathers or priests of wisdom. But that's my role. But it makes them good at that job. But now there's still only 250 badge soldiers, but there's about 2,000 support arms with them at Credden Hill. And so the tail is wagging the dog rather than the other way around these days. And that doesn't mean they're doing a bad job. It just means that it's different these days. And when special means small in terms of special forces, it's got big. And when it's big, it's more like another battalion now with a patrol company or something like that. So it's different. It's different. But I'm sure the guys are just as brave and just as good as they've ever been. And they've seen an awful lot of action in the last generation.
And even normal infantry regiments have as well, Robin. I mean, it's not just the special forces. The Royal Irish Regiment, the Paras, the Dukes. Well, it's not the Yorkshire Regiment. All of those regiments have seen action in Afghanistan. That when we served in Northern Ireland, it was the bullets would still kill you and the bombs would still kill you, but maybe just not on the scale that some raving mad jihadi who doesn't care whether he lives or dies running it with an AK-47 would.
Go back to the 70s in Northern Ireland. You're thinking about guys that are on 24-hour duty and patrolling 8 to 12 hours of a 24-hour period, waiting for somebody to shoot at you. So there are no safe zones. And when you're in the barracks, we got mortared several times.
Yep.
When I was in the Ardoyne, we got mortared into Flax Street Mill. So you were constantly under pressure. Whereas different wars, different campaigns, where you can be in you can have a front line where you can withdraw from the front line and be in a safe area. But in Northern Ireland, there were no safe areas really.
Right.
And not even when you went home. That's why the long hair is seen in the pictures of the SAS at that time, because we were working undercover in Northern Ireland, and then we had to go home and be anonymous there as well. You couldn't wear your uniform.
That's right.
Out of barracks. You only wore your uniform when you were in barracks. You went to barracks, got changed, and wore your uniform at work, and then got changed to go home. So different world. Fly back for R&R, and in cities,
and it was and on the 2-year tours, it was, you know, it was dodgy as well, because we were socializing in sort of, you know, Bangor, Hollywood, East Belfast, and of course the IRA were targeting. In fact, there was a para shot. He met a girl from Private Harrison. He was shot in Sydenham by an IRA team, and he was just meeting his girlfriend. He's off duty, and he's watching TV, and they steamed in and you know, shot him to death in front of his young girlfriend. So yeah, I think that's actually very true. That Northern Ireland, when we were in Uri, we were doing I think we were doing at one point 18 hours on the ground and like 4 hours off. It was just you know,
sleeping on the streets in Cordons, sleeping on the concrete in Cordons.
Yeah, you know. But yeah, that's right.
I did like it. I liked it. I mean, that was what
I loved it.
I'd been since I was 15 years of age. I mean, so it was being a soldier. So it wasn't a case of walk around the street and be petrified and I shouldn't be here. I loved it.
I was the same. I was exactly the same, Robin. You know, I mean, maybe we're looking back with tinted spectacles on. I didn't even wear spectacles then, but the you know, you look back and I don't look back and think I can't remember ever being really scared. Even when incidents happened, there was an adrenaline rush and there was a real, you know, there was a real buzz, but you weren't totally petrified, you know. So yeah, it's I think I've been more scared since I got out of the army than when I was ever in it, because you're always surrounded by, you know, at least 12 guys that have got your back or meant to have your back anyway, you know. So
I remember one of my this happened a couple of occasions, but this one, my Isaacs was my patrol commander, Marion Isaacs, and we were going down from Moyard Park, and there was a big wall of corrugated tin on the right hand side. And as we came patrolled in front of it, somebody opened fire on us, and Mai just ran straight at the gunfire, and we just ran with him, you know, because he was that kind of advantage, you know, would always shock the IRA. We didn't take cover; we went straight towards the gunfire, and on several occasions we recovered weapons because they dropped them and ran, because they didn't expect that; they expected you to take cover. And we would just, you know, just that kind of aggressive patrolling where something happens, you go at it.
Yeah.
Had a major firefight across the White Cross Cemetery up to the Turf Lodge, and exactly that, you know, fire a manoeuvre past the gravestones across into the Turf Lodge and recovered the Armalite weapon. One of the guys got shot, Bob England, and he was killed at Warren Point in '79. But so. Got hit the buckle on his OG belt and took a little piece out of his side, but he got killed at Warren Point.
I think that's another thing, that, you know, the amount of people that had very, very close shaves in Northern Ireland is phenomenal. I mean, you know, I was hit at Glen Road, Shore Road Junction. There was a command wire IED, and there'd been a shooting in Lenadoon, and we kind of followed up, just like you were saying. We sprinted up onto the Glen Road to see if we could cut off the terrorists. And we got to Glen Road, Shore Road Junction. There's a house on the corner, and there's broken glass. And I, very naively, an 18-year-old soldier, I say to the woman in the garden, "Excuse me, your house hasn't been taken over by the IRA, hasn't?" She says, "No, that happened last time there was a bomb here." And straight away, I just froze and went, "There's a bomb here," because that's what she was saying. She wasn't, even though she was saying, she couldn't tell me there was a bomb here. And literally, if I hadn't stopped and talked to that woman, when she said there's a bomb here, the guy that was behind the house pressed the button, and because I stopped and talked to her, I was, I don't know, 15 yards away from where I would have been on top of it, and I would have been, well, we wouldn't be having this conversation now if we would. I'd be wheeling myself around in one of those little, you know, little wheelchairs for people with no legs, you know. So, but yeah, that's how close it can be, isn't it, Robin? And again, you know, it's you look back on those things quite fondly and say, well, there we go, I survived that. That was all right, wasn't it?
1,032 members of the security forces murdered by the IRA. Exactly. 1,032 murdered by the IRA.
Exactly.
299 shot by the British military, of which 4 were declared unlawful, and 4 people went to prison for them. 4 soldiers went to prison for them. But every time, take away those 4, 295, every single one of those shootings was declared lawful in self-defense or in defense of the public. And that's the law. And it's no good saying, well, the law was corrupt then and it's not now. You know, it was the law. And you know, and that's what the the Northern Ireland Veterans Movement's about. It's about that.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, and vindicating the Operation Banner that's literally saved tens of thousands of lives and saved the country from civil war. And again, the people that are attacking us now, the well-paid lawyers, you know, the I'm not going to name them, but the nationalist Republican lawyers, if the British Army hadn't have come in, they probably wouldn't have even been born, or they would have been killed as children, because it was that bad. I mean, there would have been absolute Bosnian, Kosovan style massacres happening.
It would have spread into the Republic without a doubt.
Yeah, exactly. So, so the SAS, your time was coming to an end. What led you to leave the SAS, Robin, and what did you do after that?
Well, what led me to leave was because I was a 22-year man. You know, that was I said it'd been my life since I was 15. Was the fact that when my sergeant major was a sergeant, we had a personal issue over a lie he had told, and that lie got back to the sergeant major of B Squadron at the time, and he got a bollocking for it. And then he came and took it out on me. And when he became sergeant major, he made it his reason to live to stitch me up, to get me kicked out. So he tried several times, and it backfired several times. And then I went on an exercise with Delta Force in the USA, and got sent on patrol with 3 other guys who we were given no information, no equipment. We didn't even know that we had a live enemy on the ground, and the patrol went wrong. And to cut a very long story short, which is in Fighting Scared, I was called into the colonel's office, and the colonel said, "Well, you haven't done anything wrong this time, Horsfall, but my understanding is that you've been walking on a razor blade for a long time. So I've no alternative but to send you back to the parachute regiment." And I said, "That's all right, sir." I said, because I put my papers in to buy out yesterday. And he sat back quite stunned in his chair, and he said, "Don't do that, Horsfall." He said, "The wind blows cold on the outside." And I stood to attention. I said, "It don't blow too effing warm in here, does it, sir?" And, you know, and I was discharged. They rescinded the RTU, and I was discharged within 2 weeks. 4 weeks later, I was approached by David Juster, an officer, in the Booth Hall in Hereford. And he said, "We think that you were treated appallingly badly, and I've been asked to tell you can come back if you want." But I'd taken off the burg, and I was very, very bitter. Yeah. And so I said, "You can tell them they can shove it, but you know, it's nice to be asked." And I moved on. Yeah, that's why.
And I think you know, even in the in the regular army, those sort of things happen all the time. And I had a very similar experience. I PVR'd. I was going to do the whole lot, and I'm not going to bore you with the detail, but it was a very similar sort of scenario. And once you've kind of crossed that line where and I was like, I was due promotion to full corporal. I'd done Brecon. I was doing all right. I was only in my early 20s. But again, once you've kind of crossed that line and your face doesn't fit anymore, you've rubbed the wrong people the wrong way. Yeah. It's like, you kind of get the message, don't you? Go, the tea leaves aren't on my side here. It's
they kept sending me on courses in the hope that I would fail them. So they sent me on Arabic and I got a B. They sent me on the Royal Marine sniper course and I got a marksman pass. They tried all sorts of things. They tried to say that the guys didn't like me, and so I said, "Look, that's fair, boss. You're new here as a squadron commander. Go and ask the guys yourself." I said, "And if they agree with that, then I'll happily go." And he came back and said, "Well, yeah, maybe there's been a mistake." So it was an ongoing process. But in an institution where 2 senior people have it in for you, and you can't move sideways somewhere.
That's right.
But again, it turned out to be, looking back on my life, a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's the same, because the reality is, I think, you can almost become institutionalized, and I'm not criticizing anyone that's done the whole lot and got the pension and all that, fair play to them. They've done more than I've done, and, they've stuck it longer than I did. But I think it kind of gives you don't maybe have such a full understanding of the world as somebody that's kind of done a bit and got out and actually had to survive in the horrible, ruthless you know, the one thing the officer was right, that the wind does blow cold on the outside, and it's if it goes wrong, it can go wrong big time, and there's no safety net. I've often said it's far more stressful, trying to run a business or have a sales job than it is to get up in the morning in the military and go and do, even if you're going to face, terrorists or some sort of conflict or whatever. It's far more stressful being in Civvy Street trying to keep a roof over your family's head and pay the bills. Because obviously, slightly different for you, because I know you went on to have a career in security, but a lot of guys that get out of the military, if they do get out before they get pension age, especially if they're infantry, like, what have you got? All you've got is your guile and your mouth, and that's that's.
Well, I was a qualified paramedic, luckily, which helped. But I still did some soldiering. I was a contract soldier, or mercenary, as some people call it, in Sri Lanka when the war was going on there with the Tamils, and then in Mozambique with Frelimo. I was a major with Frelimo, and but that's only a piece of my life. There's a hell of a lot of other things. I built a hospital on a gold mine in the jungle in Guyana.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
One of the things I'm most proud of when I was in the SAS wasn't the assault on the Iranian embassy, was the fact that I discovered a measles epidemic in the deserts of Oman, and got the Sultan to ship in an inoculation team, a vaccination team, which everybody understands now, and saved hundreds of children's lives because they were dying of measles.
Yep.
There's so much more. And you said a career in security. It wasn't really, because most of my adult life was spent teaching children martial arts.
Yeah. Well, that's what I wanted to get onto that, Robin, because it's something. Again, I was, I did Wado-ryu karate for about 4 or 5 years in my mid to late 20s, and loved it. I gave up for lots of different reasons, but it was great. And you carried on doing it. Just tell us about your karate, because you started that when you were in the SAS. And actually, can I just from the point of view of the book, I thought it was really, again, this is a really interesting aside. What you say in the book is that the SAS guys weren't taught unarmed combat then. I don't know if they are now, but back then you said basically you were the first one to go and do karate and actually be able to handle yourself without a weapon, which I thought was, because you always think of these SAS guys as sort of super ninjas that can shoot you, and then if they disarm, they can pull you apart with their bare hands. But that wasn't really the case, was it?
I wouldn't quite couch it in the terms that you did. Most of the guys that were in the SAS when I was there were former paras, and so they could fight. I made the point about them being able to fight. They could fight. They were tough guys. They could fight. And the basic principle of fighting, as far as a paratrooper was concerned, when he doesn't have a gun, is to use any method possible to destroy you as quickly as possible, vicious and violent. And the paras taught me how to be that way. But I still lack that piece I mentioned right at the very beginning, about self-confidence with my peer group. And so Bob Curry said, I'm going to go and join the local karate club. And I said, I'll come with you. And so we went down to town and we joined the local karate club, which was me and Bob and 10 kids standing in a line. But he quit after 3 months, and I did it for 33 years. It gave me something special. Now, when you learn martial arts, a lot of people learn martial arts for a lot of different reasons. But I was learning it subliminally for self-confidence reasons. I wanted to be able to know that I could deal with people on a face-to-face basis without a weapon, without a gun, without picking up a chair or anything else, or a knife or anything else like that. And then I would go and sort these bastards out that were picking on me. But of course, it changes you.
That's right.
And as you become more proficient and more confident, your peers notice that change in you. So the people that were a problem in the past are no longer a problem. So it's in some ways it creates a situation where you're no longer a target and no longer a victim. because it develops you as a person and your self-confidence, but not immediately, not in 3 weeks or 3 months or 3 years necessarily, but over a long period of time. And the regiment didn't have unarmed combat training. It was all pistols. It was all focused on undercover Northern Ireland. It was all guns, for good reasons. But I wanted that, so I went and started it. We did eventually get some unarmed combat training started in the regiment. But to be fair, unless you are practicing something like that on a daily basis and learning it and studying it and repeating it over and over again, then it doesn't work in real life. It works in real life when it's done without thought and spontaneously, just as you would flinch when somebody flicks a hand at your face. But there's greater depth to it than fighting. And
Yes.
so I used my bad experiences. Karate wasn't something that I wanted to make a living out of initially. It was teaching. Karate was the catalyst that allowed me to teach. So I started teaching a group of kids in Chiswick in West London, 3 kids in a squash court. And within weeks, I had 20. And within months, I had 100. And I built it up to 1,000 over the years. And my son took over the business when I broke my neck. And he's now got 1,000 kids in Southwest London and about 50 adults. And he's continuing to develop and build on the things that I taught. But I used those experiences, those bad experiences as a young person, to understand the kids I was teaching. And it's not, a good teacher gets 9 out of 10 kids to do what they want. You know, that 9 out of 10, that's my job's done. Never mind him, he's a wanker. My focus was always to make sure I got the 10th.
Yeah.
When I got the 10th, I got that huge buzz from teaching, you know, because I had to paint a different picture or a different way of showing that person how to understand this method, this technique. And so the challenges and the joys I got for it, the challenges and joys of teaching and helping young people to become happier individuals in their later lives. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that you know, again, from my limited experience of karate, I mean, I was, you know, it almost becomes an addiction. I mean, I was training sort of five days a week, and finding all the different, you know, because obviously Wadaroo, it's quite, you know, it was all over the place in Northern Ireland. You could literally, you know, drive sort of 20 minutes, you know, every night and be at a different class, and it becomes addictive. And it's almost like doing drill, except there's a purpose. I could never understand drill in the army. There's no purpose to doing drill, but yeah, I know there is, but like, you know, not really. And I often wonder, why doesn't the army do karate instead of doing drill, you know? But that's another story. But yeah, I mean, I loved it. And again, it does give you that, and you never forget, even though I haven't done it practice for a long, you know, a lot of years, you still know how to kick and you still know how to punch. I think the only thing that Wadaroo probably missed was maybe, you know, sort of grappling. That, you know, there wasn't a whole lot of grappling. It was a lot of
Karate's a striking art.
Yeah,
you know, so the emphasis is on trying to stay on your feet.
Yeah,
and destroy the person with impact. But you know, sometimes if that's unsuccessful and it goes to ground, then you need to have certain experiences of what to do then. There's huge differences between an art and a fight.
Yeah.
You continue the study to get to a greater depth of understanding for the pure joy and beauty of it. The skills of fighting are not the same. So you build up your physical fitness, your self-confidence, your skill range. But when it comes to a real fight situation, you maybe have 3 techniques that you know work and use them effectively. You need in real life to learn how to confront groups, pairs, trios, knowing when it's the wisest thing to run away, which is the most effective form of self-defense for anybody. Always run away if you can. Try to take your own advice if you're the teacher. But there are no bad martial arts. There are bad martial arts teachers. People go, this style and Bruce Lee style and this, you know, that's not really the point. They're all paths to the top of the same mountain. but there are good and bad teachers, just like there are good and bad doctors and lawyers. You know.
Did you find with the martial arts, I mean, obviously, you were doing some pretty intense training when in the military. You must have had some joint problems, some knee problems, some cartilage problems. Did you find the karate helped that at all with the stretching and the mobility side of things, or were you not really trouble with that too much?
I think I didn't start karate till I was 23. So consequently, all that mountain running and para training and carrying Bergens had already made, my tendons on my legs quite limited in their range. But a lot of the flashy kicks in martial arts are exactly that. They're flashy kicks. All the best targets on the human body are below the waist. So, they're showman stuff. I mean, they can work, and on one occasion I did spontaneously knock somebody out with a head kick, but there was no thought or planning behind it.
Yeah.
It's the martial arts. If you learn martial arts as a sport, I call that a martial sport. It's done for competition. It's done for speed, athleticism, winning prizes. Great, fun, wonderful. But it's not necessarily going to be enough in a really violent situation outside a nightclub on a wet floor on a cold winter's nights up against two people who have been taking drugs and so on. So my school has always concentrated on traditional martial arts, but with that part of the learning process added on as well. Here we are tonight. We're in a real place in real time, and these are the circumstances. What do you do?
And especially in London, I mean, because it seems that London's becoming an increasingly violent place. But again, what you said, I think, is very important, that running away. I mean, if somebody pulls a knife on you, I don't care how quick or how hard you are. If you just time that wrong, you're toast. I mean, it's as simple as that, And I think,
if you run away, and they catch you, then maybe you have to fight. Or if there's a kid, one of your children there, or your wife, and you can't run away, so there are circumstances where you can't, but if that's an option, it's a good option.
Yeah.
If giving them your wallet is going to stop you or your wife or your kids from getting seriously hurt or stabbed or killed, then it's another good option. But if somebody, and sometimes the first thing you know is you being attacked. It's not a case of give me this, or it's not like the movies. The first thing you know is you've been struck from behind with a heavy object, or somebody's grabbed you. So being prepared for those circumstances. One of the things about sport martial art, to a limited degree, and not for everybody, is that you don't learn to take a whack in the head. Whereas you box, you learn to take a whack in the head, and you get a strong neck, and you understand how to roll with the impact or to go with it. There are lots of different skills, and there are lots of different advantages to this and disadvantages to that. But as I say, they're all passed to the top of the same mountain. People like me can offer a level of realism to the classes, and my group, London Karate, has been around for 30 years now, so it's still going, it's still running, focused around Richmond, Kingston on Thames, Putney, around that area, and so it's still strong, and it's still working. But excellent. The thing is, those kind of things are not the sort of things you say to parents about, I'm going to teach your kids how to kill people on the street. No, you don't. No. That's not what you teach to children. But teaching children is such a joy. It's such a joy, because they come with a blank slate. They don't already have an opinion.
And again, it almost brings you full circle, doesn't it, Robin? Because when you think about where you started, when you were young, and even when I was young, I mean, there were no karate classes where I grew up. I mean, I'd love to have done karate when I was a kid, but there was a bit of boxing, but there was no karate available. And it's almost like you come full circle, because when you think about the sort of bullying and that if you'd have been a kid, I was thinking about when I read the book, if you'd have been a kid that had basically been doing boxing or doing karate from 7 or 8 years old, when the first guy that hit you in the face, he might have beat you, but he'd got a big shock back, wouldn't he? And I think that's one of the good things about doing martial arts. It's a controlled environment to teach kids how to do that. And again, like you say, it's they could do with doing a lot more of that than the PlayStation and the stuff.
We teach in a lot of state schools in that area now. So
in the schools, wow.
In the state schools, as part of the curriculum, we've got I think about 8 or 9 state schools that we teach in as part of the school curriculum in the day, and Kingston Academy being one of them. Yeah. So there's, as I said, there's a lot of benefits to martial arts that don't have anything to do with fighting.
Absolutely. What's for the future, Robin? What you like to say? We've covered. We've only touched on it. Honestly, guys, get that book, because it is. I don't normally read a book in a day, and I got that book. I said to Robin, I said, I'll maybe skim through it, and I'll maybe read half of it, and I just couldn't put it down. So buy the book. What was crumbs? I've got the title. What was it? Running Scared?
Fighting Scared.
Fighting Scared. Yeah, get that book and read it, because it's so rich, and you've had such a diverse life and so many different things going on. What's next on the agenda? In fact, tell us a bit about the degree that you did and what that was all about.
I broke my neck doing karate with my eldest son Alex, and I was talking to a class and hitting an impact pad. Now, when you get very, very good at the technique of punching, you're essentially putting something like 1.5 tons into these 2 knuckles, and the applied physics from your knuckles all the way down to your back foot create a situation where the energy only has a release point in the target. But me, being a gobshite, I was talking to the class, and I whipped my hips around and hit the pad, but my neck was still in this tipped position instead of being absolutely straight onto the target. And I felt some pain, but just carried on teaching the class. And later that night, I could hardly move my neck, and I went off to hospital and was I was lost some of the feeling in the tips of my fingers, and I was triaged to the back of the queue by somebody who didn't know their job. And after 4 hours of waiting, I went home, got some hot towels in the microwave, and took Panadol. 6 months later, I was still having very, very bad headaches. So I went back to hospital, and they said, you've had a fracture that's healed. So, we can only give you palliative care and massage and stuff like that. But it was affecting my ability to teach. Now, if you've ever been in one of those situations, so I handed over the business to the chief instructor position to my eldest son, Alex. If you've ever been in a situation where you've got a pounding headache from a hangover and the phone rings, and you pick up the phone and it's something important, you start to talk to the person on the other end. And for that period of time, you forget about the headache, don't you?
Yeah.
Well, I thought, and then when you put the phone down, your headache comes back. So there's a big psychological part to do with pain. So I thought, what can I do? What can I do now that that I've done this for 30 years? What can I do now? I want a degree. What do you like to do? Well, I've already written Fighting Scared. So, I felt that I was capable of more than that. It took me 6 years to write Fighting Scared, because, when you write a book and you don't know how to do it, it's like putting up shelves and you're not a carpenter. So I applied to do English literature with creative writing at Surrey University, because I wanted to, but also because I knew it would give me something to focus on while this neck was gradually treated and healed. So off I went to Surrey University, an ex-paratrooper, SAS soldier, martial arts teacher, and I was thrust into the Surrey humanities faculty with a huge number of young women. 19 out of 21, 22 people on my course were young women. And the faculty was dominated by radical feminists.
I knew this was coming.
And so, that was an interesting time, because they had already pigeonholed me. And I think it took me something like, 18 months for them to realize that, I wasn't a right-wing homophobic killer of people, that I was somebody that, had some experiences that perhaps they could benefit from. And it's also not cool to sit next to the old man. You don't want to sit next to your granddad at school. So being an ex-soldier, I was always early. So I'd go in. If I sat in the front line, everybody sat in the second. If I sat in the second, they sat in the front. So So I got a little bit isolated. So I found a guy on a master's course called Stephen Davids, and he was doing a master's course in English, and I used to go out to play with him at lunchtime because he was 50, and I was 56. But I learned such a great deal about academic work, about the Harvard method, about empirical information, evidencing evidencing an opinion, creating an argument, all those things that went with it. But I also improved my skills with writing. And
I had to put that up there, Robin.
yeah,
good old Aidan.
I learned to live and work with these people, and came away respecting them as much as me. There was a wonderful teacher called Jude Roberts, who was so clever and intimidating, and she had introduced herself on day one. I'm Jude Roberts, and I'm a radical feminist. Oh yes, right, here we go. And she academically bullied me for a while, but when I left, I went for a short walk down the road with her up to the cathedral, and she was leaving. I said, "I'm so sorry you're leaving." I said, "Because I've learned so much from you." I said, "You are the cleverest person I've ever met." And she said, "No, Robin," she said, "everybody's clever. It's just what they're clever at." And I had the courage then to explain to her how she'd made me feel at the beginning. So, I'd learned not to judge people so radically, and to move through those things. So it was a great experience. And I got all the mortarboard and the gown and everything, and went to the graduation and got my certificate with a big beaming smile, because I was that boy who had left school at 15,
Yeah.
a truant who had failed.
Yeah.
No, it was a great achievement for me personally, and I've used it in many ways since. I use it to make arguments at a political level, to reference and cite information correctly, so I'm talking with evidence, not just opinion. So yeah, it was very, very useful time. But the future, I want to write more books. The Warrior Poet Soldier's Song, that's really using my academic prowess, because it's poetry, and I love the rhythms and the forms of poetry, and learned that it's not just rhyming verse. So I put a great deal into that, but and took love and hate and war and fear and all those things and put them in the poems in the book. But poetry is a hard sell. People use it.
Yeah, I'm going to try. I'm going to try with this poem one more time here, Robin, before we close, because if I can get it up, it wasn't down to the system not working. It was down to my ineptitude at using the system. So let me just see if I can get this. Let me see if I can find this again. So just give me 2 ticks. Close that down. While I'm doing this, Robin, if you just want to tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, they can. They put Robin Horsfall in Google, robinhorsfall.co.uk. I'm a public speaker. I've got appointments for that in the autumn, talking about all these adventures and experiences on the stage. So if people want me, they can contact me through the Robin Horsfall page. I want to do a tour of England promoting the veterans cause, the Northern Ireland veterans cause, and I'm very willing to come to military places and veterans organisations and talk about myself and entertain, and then get into the nitty and gritty of the veterans campaign as well, to raise funds for them. So yeah, that's what I plan to do.
Yeah, I mean, let me see. Here we go. I think I've got this. So let's try this again. And let's say if it stop this.
Good, I'm lucky.
Okay, so let's see. If I can't do this time, I'm going to give up and I'll play it for the guys next time I do a live stream. This is what you call bad planning. Here we go. Share audio. That's what I needed to do. Right. So this should work now. Let's have a little go. Share. And let's get that full screen. Where are we? There we go. So
play.
full screen and play, and this should be it. So let's enjoy this poem. You've been waiting for an hour and a half if you've been watching this from the beginning, so enjoy. This is absolute dynamite.
On the desert road to Baghdad, did you care when the ground began to shake? Were you there with the dead along the streets, little kids beneath old sheets? Was there time between your meets in your chair? Did you care? Was it fair?
I'm looking for a shadow, hoping for a drink, walking past an IED and trying not to think, fighting for a general 1,000 miles away, eating lousy rations while he tries to cut our pay.
As I walked the Afghan plain, where were you? Every night beneath the rain was nothing new. In your nice warm bed at night, did you waken with a fright? Did she make it all right and stroke your hair? Did you care? Did you care? Did you care?
I'm looking for a shadow, hoping for a drink, walking past an IED and trying not to think, fighting for a general 1,000 miles away, eating lousy rations while he tries to cut our pay.
When you lied and our wives cried, did you care? Leaving love and life behind made men weep. When our homes had broken hearts and our pain was off the charts, when you sent us faulty parts. Were you there? Were you there? Were you there?
I'm looking for a shadow, hoping for a drink, walking past an IED and trying not to think, fighting for a general 1,000 miles away, eating lousy rations while he tries to cut our pay.
When my wife said welcome home, were you there? When she pushed me down the street a broken man? When my pension was delayed as my legs were being made? Was it fair? Was it fair? Was it fair?
I'm looking for a shadow, hoping for a drink, walking past an IED and trying not to think, fighting for a general 1,000 miles away, eating lousy rations while he tries to cut our pay.
When the dreams come in the night, will you dare to share with me my wet and lonely shame? Will my medals help my slumber? Was I just an army number? Is it you we must remember? Don't you care? Don't you bloody dare, Tony Blair. I'm looking for a shadow, hoping for a drink, walking past an IED and trying not to think, fighting for a general 1,000 miles away, eating lousy rations while he tries to cut our pay.
Wow. I don't think we can really say much after that, Robin. That's powerful. That's a powerful, powerful poem. And I think from the point of view of listening to that, it's the third time I've listened to that now. It's like a lot of you is in that. Do you know what I mean? It's like your personal experiences. It's not just, obviously, you're talking about Afghanistan, you're talking about Iraq, you're talking about Blair, but that's your life in the military. That's your experience, you know, and tens of thousands of other soldiers that have gone before and will no doubt come again.
It references both types of injuries, the physical ones and the non-physical ones, and the bitterness with how the veterans are treated by their governments when it's all history.
Yeah, powerful. I think we'll end there, Robin. If you could just hang on the channel just for 2 seconds once I go off the broadcast, just to have a bit of a debrief. But again, thank you, Robin, for spending an hour and a half of your time doing this. And hopefully we'll get some more people supporting the veterans' causes in Northern Ireland. I'm going to post the GoFundMe in the comments below. I've already posted all of the contacts that you need to use to get to Robin and to reach him. So his website's there, a link to his book, both printed and Kindle, are there, and we can add other stuff as well, and obviously his YouTube channel. Please follow Robin's YouTube channel, because we need to get that build up. I mean, I think if about 300-400 followers. We need to get that up. You should have tens of thousands of followers, Robin, because some of the stuff on there is dynamite. So guys,
grandpa, technology has become something which will become for all grandpas one day, but it's under the Wise Old Paratrooper.
Yeah,
my YouTube page, Wise Old Paratrooper.
So people, you need to follow Robin and listen to what he's got to say, because he is a wise old power trooper. On that note, we'll end the broadcast, and thank you all very much for watching.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.